Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Spotlight. In this special episode titled Go with the Flow with Sanjeev Sanyal, we are delighted to feature a truly remarkable personality, someone you may have seen dancing on Instagram Reels or practicing in high level closed door government meetings. He is an economist, author, paraglider, and dancer. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister Office with the rank of Secretary, Government of India. We hope you enjoy this conversation. Let's go with the flow with Sanjeev Sanyal.
I do a lot of things in many different spaces. And many people ask me, why is it that I do that? It's not like I am spending time thinking that, here are 5 different things that I try to do. The reason I do this is that, in fact, in my own mind, there are actually no silos. So it's not like I'm deliberately attempting to do something here and then attempting to do something there. In my mind, they are actually quite open and fluid because I have myself found through the course of my life, I'm now 55 years old, that most of the things that I actually attempt to do don't turn out the way I wanted them to turn out. That doesn't necessarily mean that things turn out worse. It's just that they turn out different from what I envisaged. So over time, I have decided to simply go with the flow. And I found that to be an interesting journey as a result. So let me give you some sense of my life journey from Kolkata, where I actually was born and I spent my formative years there. So I studied at St. Xavier's School and then at St. James School in Kolkata. And at the age of 18, if you had met me, you would have basically found somebody who is basically would be considered a science maths type. Okay. So I was a science maths type. And one of the good things about finishing my class 12 exams was that I was 100% sure that I would never have to do anything at all to do with literature ever again. So, having solved that, the other thing is I was also completely unclear what I wanted to do. Since I was a science maths type, it meant that I wouldn't probably do something like in science, history, those kinds of subjects, probably something in the realms of engineering, maths, even economics or something. But I was very clear, this was 1989. I was very clear that I had to get out of Kolkata. So I got into a train, those days trains, and then came to Delhi University. And I knew nothing much about Delhi University, but as you know, the admissions happened the height of summer and in June. So I went around Delhi University, randomly putting in applications into all kinds of subjects. And so mostly I applied for physics, maths type subjects. But I also went to Sriram College, which doesn't have physics and maths. So I put in an application into economics. And then the time came to, I didn't get through into everywhere, but I did get through to several institutions. And I eventually had to make a choice. So ultimately, I made a choice to study economics in Sriram College of Commerce on the somewhat flimsy ground that my best friend at that time, a guy called Anupam Bhatnagar, also decided to study economics there. So then I ended up studying economics. Anyway, I had a great time in 3 years of Delhi University and Sriram were absolutely great. I didn't attend too many classes, but I'm good at taking exams. So my college did not stop me from taking the exam because I was their college topper, and it would have been somewhat embarrassing to stop the college topper from taking the exams on grounds of non-attendance. But I did represent my college in all kinds of other things. I also at that time took up a sport of paragliding. So in fact, I have India's first paragliding license. Mhm. And I also was a national level kayaking and canoeing guy at that time. So I used to do all those kinds of things. Anyway, but end of 3 years, I absolutely had no clue what I still wanted to do. But I got a scholarship to study in Oxford, so I set off to Oxford. Many people asked me, would you like to take the civil service exam? Now, I said absolutely not, because by this point, my parents had moved to Delhi, and they were living in that time Moti Bagh, and I used to live in Moti Bagh, and I was the one thing in life I did not I wasn't clear what to do, but I was clear about one thing: I did not wish to live in Moti Bagh ever again. So I then went to Oxford. I spent 3 years, 3 years scholarship. So I finished that thing. So then, usual thing is, would you like to finish your DPhil or PhD with the doctorate in Oxford? And uh, so most people would probably think that's a good thing, but I was by this point completely sick and tired of libraries. So I decided instead that I would have nothing to do with academia ever again. So somebody offered me a job in Singapore in a company I had never heard of called Crosby Securities, in a profession also which I had never heard about, which is to become a financial markets economist. So the selling point was they set me a first class ticket. So I took the flight to Singapore, got the job, and I ended up working as a financial markets economist in Singapore. And of course, it had the strong point that it was not in academia. It had nothing to do with literature or history or anything. And of course, it had nothing to do with Motivak. So now here we are in 2025. I work in the government. I live in New Motivak. I uh, I am now known as a writer uh, of history books in particular. And for all my dislike of academia, I'm the chancellor of one of India's best known universities. So I have come to the conclusion over this journey that mostly it is a pointless activity trying to have these silos in your head about what is going to happen, what subjects to study, and what to do. So I have found that it's much easier to just go with the flow. And if some idea looks exceptionally mad, then the best thing to do with it is to give it a shot. So here I was sitting in Singapore, working as a Deutsche Bank's global strategist and a managing director, when I got an offer from the then Honorable Finance Minister Jaitley ji and the Honorable Prime Minister, asking me whether I would join the government. This was in 2017, rather in 2016 end actually. And I happened to have this conversation in the strangest of places on the steps of number 10 Downing Street. I happened to have gone there for a breakfast meeting organized by Prime Minister Cameron, who had hosting Jaitley ji. And since I was um, in London for a conference, and for whatever, I'm not 100% sure why on earth they knew I was there or why they thought I was a good idea to invite me. But I ended up going to this breakfast at number 10 Downing Street. And as I was coming out, the door closed behind me, and I decided this was a good time to take a selfie of myself at number 10, since there was nobody else there. So as I was trying to get myself correctly positioned, the door opened, and Jaitley ji was standing behind me. So of course, I quickly put my phone down, and so both of us are standing there. So that's where Jaitley ji then quietly turns to me, looks around. There's nobody there, and he says, "So Sanjeev, I was having a chat with Modi ji, and he asked me to ask you whether you would come back to India and work as part of our team." Now, I can assure you, I have never planned this, and there is no way to plan this. How on earth could you have created that fee? But here I am. I joined the government in 2017 beginning, and here I am 8.5 years later, still working in the government. So, you know, this has been a journey. And of course, along this way, I had done things which usually expect government civil servants to do. It's been a journey in which, I made policy. I was 5 years in the finance industry as the principal economic advisor. And these were tumultuous times, as you will know. This was the time when I was part of the team that cleaned up the banks. I was part of the team that managed the economy through the COVID period. I was involved in putting together 5 economic surveys. And then in beginning of 2022, just after I had presented the 2022 economic survey and budget, I then was shifted to the Prime Minister's economic team, where I am still today. Of course, most of what I do entails policy making and so on. But along the way, I also got to do a few other things. So this was about 4 years ago. The Honorable Prime Minister asked me to come and make a presentation on a topic. And uh, I usually take advantage of these occasions. And if I'm given half an hour to make a talk, I'll make my presentation and took 15 minutes, in about 25 minutes. And I'll have 5 minutes left to make some random presentation of my own. This is a deal I now have with him. And in one of those 5 minute random presentation, I told him that, sir, as you are aware, I wrote a book in 2015 called The Ocean of Church, which is a history of the Indian Ocean. So it's a history of course, the Indian Ocean, but also about how Indians sailed these oceans. Unfortunately, there are these colonial era histories which have given us the impression that Indians, for some strange reason, never crossed the oceans, which is an absolute lie. Because all you have to do is to go to Southeast Asia, and there is, you'll find there is a whole country called Singapore. Yeah. The largest Hindu temple in the world is not in India, it's in Cambodia. There's a whole country called Indonesia, which names itself after us. Its currency is called the rupiah. In fact, they have the correct pronunciation, not us. And you're telling us we never crossed the oceans. You've got to be kidding me. So I wrote this book in 2015 to make this case, and it had what was at that time considered to be fairly controversial ideas, but 10 years later, let me say, it has now become mainstream. This book is now widely taught, including in the Indian Navy, in the merchant, or anything related to maritime. This book is now taught. But as a part of that research, one of the things I discovered was that Indians used to build their ships using a particular technique called the stitching technique. They did not nail their ships together, even though they had access to rust-free nails. They used to literally stitch it together. And so I had collected quite a lot of information on this stitching technique. Now, this stitching technique did not completely die out. We still build small boats the size of the stage. Large ships using this technique have not been built for some time. So I began to research what these ships may have looked like, and I discovered that the earliest evidence that I can use to make a ship, sort of build a ship of this kind, to look at what kind of design we could use of this, was there in a painting in Ajanta. And there were some coins from the Satavahana period as well. And there's a book called the Yukti Kalpataru as well, written by Raja Bhoj, which also describes these ships. So there's some other evidence, but this was the main evidence. Using this evidence and some, records here and there, I decided that let's see if I can design such a ship. So now, as you can have understood, that I have absolutely no training in ship design, but these kinds of things has never stopped me. So about 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, I decided, with the help of a friend of mine called Hmans, who's in the Navy, we decided to try and attempt to design this ship. And so we put it together, but to test whether or not the idea was completely ridiculous, I managed to convince, and I don't know how I managed to do this, but I managed to convince IIT Delhi's marine architecture school to invite me to give a talk on marine architecture. Now, as I said, I have no idea why they agreed, but nevertheless, I went and gave this lecture. And I gave a very technical, and they thought maybe I'll give a history type of lecture. But in fact, I gave them a very technical lecture, complete with Navier-Stokes equations on meshing, how to do, testing, everything. So they were rather surprised that, I was willing to get into technical details. But since I survived that presentation, I came to the conclusion that maybe I was onto a good thing. So as I now go back to the fact that I had that extra 5 minutes with the Honorable Prime Minister, in that 5 minutes, I made a presentation to him on how an ancient Gupta period ship could be recreated. So, and then I told him, sir, do I have your permission and support to build this? So he looked at me and he was silent for about 20 seconds. Then he said, Karo, lekin doobna mat. So now I had his permission. So then I took this around to various ministry to see if I could get some support for this. So turned out that there were some funds lying around in culture ministry on something called Project Mosam, which they hadn't been using. So I said, okay, why don't you fund me to build this ship? So I got that funding. I got the Navy involved because I needed project managers and people who actually understood the ocean. And in Goa, there's a shipyard called Bodhi who also agreed to help me build this ship. Now, the first and obvious problem is who's going to build it, because obviously we don't build ships in this style anymore. It turns out that in Bepur in Kerala, there's a person called, he's now 70 years old. His name is Badhu Sankaran. Now, Badhu Sankaran's family has been building ships uh, for thousands of years, maybe. As far as he knows, that's what his family has done. And when he was young, they had given him, his grandparents had taught him the rules of thumb of how to build a large ship using the stitching technique. So, although the stitching technique is no longer used for large ships, his grandparents had taught him the rules of thumb for doing this. So, I got hold of him, and it was kind of urgent to do this because his own children are not interested in learning. So he's literally the last person who knows how to build a large ship using this stitching technique. There are still people who build small local boats using it, but large ship is a totally different game. So I got hold of him, took him to Hodi, got the Navy involved, and we began constructing the ship about 2 years ago. In May of 2025, the ship is fully built. We put it in water. To our great relief, it did not sink. And then we towed it to Karwar, where it was actually formally incorporated it into the Indian Navy. So it is as much a part of the Indian Navy as the aircraft carrier. It's called INSD Condenya. Yeah. So let me tell you before I get to that, the name has a significance. So Condenya is the name of the first Indian mariner of whom we know of by name. So of course, there were Indian mariners even in Harappan times, but you don't know the actual name. So how do we know this name? It's because of a very interesting story which you should know. So some 2000 odd years ago, we don't know the exact date, so it's a rough estimate. Some 2000 odd years ago, there was a Indian merchant called Kondanya who was sailing a merchant ship along the Mekong Delta. This is what is now Cambodia, southern Vietnam, that area. And when he was sailing along that area, he was attacked by pirates. But Kondanya was a brave lad. He rallied his crew and they fought the pirates off. But there was a problem because his ship now developed some leaks. So he took his ship and beached the ship onto the coast somewhere, and they were fixing it when he got surrounded by all sides by the local Naga tribe, serpent tribe. Now things were very hopeless because this was a full tribe against his small crew. But he was surrounded. There's no escape because he had beached his ship. So things were looking pretty dire. But then his luck changed. It turned out that the Naga tribe was led by a warrior princess called Soma. And Soma saw Kondanya and fell in love. And she proposed marriage. Now, at this point, I don't think Kondanya had too much choice in the matter. So he accepted the proposal and he got married. And Soma and Kondanya then set up a dynasty which was the first Hindu kingdom in Southeast Asia. And for the next many thousands of years, right down to the present day, all the royal lineages of Southeast Asia derive their royal sort of origins to the marriage of Kondanya with Soma. So this story is not known in India, but it is widely known in Southeast Asia. In fact, we go to Angkor, etc. Many places the story is inscribed because any king will first give this story and then he will give his lineage of how to arrive at himself through, children of children of children of children, like that. So that is why we decided that, look, this was it was correct that we name this ship after this great mariner. Now, the ship is currently being tested, and I have been, I've just last week, I spent a week, the Diwali week. We had some holidays, so I spent it training in Karwar, where the ship is based. That's our naval base. And now I will probably go there for a few more days of training. But I have a crew of 15 who are training much harder than I am, but uh, they are full-time dedicated Navy sailors. And on probably the 29th of December, we will attempt to sail the ship across for its maiden voyage to Oman. So this will be a 2 to 3 week crossing depending on the wind. There's nothing modern in the ship except for some safety equipment. It is built as it would have been in the Gupta period. It does not even have a rudder. It uses a trailing oar, a steering oar, which was what existed at that time. It does not use lateen sails. It uses square sails, which is what existed there. Lateen sails were invented later. So it has some, uh, uh, what should I say, archaic features, which makes it difficult to sail because with a square sail, I can only sail with the wind. I cannot sail at an angle to the wind. Um, Similarly, when I hit a big wave, because I have stitched hull, the hull actually caves in a little bit and goes out, which if you're not used to it, can be quite disconcerting when you're inside the key, inside the hull, and below the deck, and sort of it suddenly moves in towards you. It can be quite disconcerting till you get used to it. So this ship is therefore quite unique. As I said, there is no living person who knows how to sail this, so we are literally learning. And the idea is that having done this, if we are successful in this voyage to Oman and back, then next year we will attempt to do something more ambitious, which is to sail from Odisha to the island of Bali to recreate an ancient route called the Bali Yatra. So that is what we will attempt to do, although that is a very long voyage of 3 months, so I don't think I will get time off for that. But for the first voyage, I will be on board for the voyage. It's 2 to 3 weeks, so I think I manage. With that, let me stop.
So, guys, that was Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal, and his work is truly making a difference. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. This podcast wasn't planned, but it happened because of Flow allowed us to join their conference and listen the conversation. This conversation was possible only because of Miss Unamji, Director of Flow Women's Association, permitted us to share it with you, all of you. Meanwhile, thank you so much for listening and keep pushing the boundaries, keep making change, and stay tuned with Business Club TV for more business insights. See you in the next time.